The story we were all told was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. It was, in fact, the second great lie. The first lie, that a solar flare had knocked out our satellites, was too crude, too easily disproven by the thousands of independent astronomers who could see with their own eyes that the sun was quiet. So, the Aegis Council, the secret shadow government formed during the Atlas Panic, scrambled and pivoted. They engineered a new, far more sophisticated narrative, one that we have all been fed for months. This was the lie of the broken comet. It was a story of a large, chaotic, interstellar visitor that had simply succumbed to the thermal and gravitational stresses of our solar system. Its fragmentation, we were told, was a natural, though spectacular, cometary breakup. This lie was brilliant. It explained everything. It explained the Great Blackout as a freak, natural, electromagnetic pulse released by the fracturing of a crystalline, icy core. It explained the impossible trajectory as the result of chaotic, uneven outgassing from the newly exposed fragments. It was natural. It was random. It was boring. And that was the entire point. The Great Normalization campaign was a resounding success. The world, terrified by the blackout, sighed in collective relief. It was just a celestial accident. But the entire story was a fabrication, a deliberate, global-scale psychological operation. Because the Aegis Council knew a truth that was infinitely more terrifying. The fragmentation was not an accident, it was an action. The cloud of debris was not the event, it was the chaff. It was a smokescreen, a deliberate, tactical deployment of a stealth cloud to hide the single most important object in human history, which was sitting, perfectly intact, right in the middle of it. The broken comet lie was so effective because, for a time, our own technology confirmed it. The chaff, the cloud of ice, dust, and gas released by the entity, was a perfect, multi-spectrum stealth screen. It was brilliantly designed to defeat the very tools we would use to look at it. Our primary eye on the sky, the Hubble Space Telescope, was rendered completely and utterly useless. Hubble is an optical telescope. It sees the universe in the same visible light spectrum that our own eyes do. When NASA, in a piece of performative, public-facing science, aimed Hubble at the anomaly, what did it see? It saw exactly what the entity wanted it to see. It saw a dazzling, chaotic, and completely impenetrable cloud of dust and ice crystals, brilliantly illuminated by the sun. It was like trying to photograph a sniper hidden in the center of a smoke grenade. The fragments we all saw, the ones that dominated the news, were just the largest, brightest, and most reflective pieces of this smokescreen. Hubble could not pierce the veil. Our ground-based telescopes, also operating in the visible spectrum, were equally blind. The lie was perfect because it was technologically sound. The Aegis Council, in their secret bunkers, were both terrified and, in a strange way, relieved. The entity was hiding, and this hiding gave them time. It gave them cover to maintain their solar flare and broken comet narratives. They could not be proven wrong, because their own, best public instruments were blind. But the Council knew something the public did not. They knew that in the last year, humanity had, for the first time, deployed a new kind of eye in the sky. An eye that did not see invisible light. An eye that did not see reflections. An eye that saw only one thing, heat. And a dust cloud, no matter how thick, cannot hide heat. This is the story of how a $10 billion scientific instrument, a symbol of pure, peaceful, international collaboration, was secretly commandeered and turned into the most powerful military reconnaissance tool in human history. The James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, is not like Hubble. Its massive, golden mirrors are not designed to see light, they are designed to see heat, the infrared spectrum. It was built to see the fate, ancient heat of the first galaxies born after the Big Bang, a light so old it has been retired or shifted into the infrared. And it is this exact capability that makes it the only tool in our arsenal capable of piercing a cold dust cloud. While the public was being fed a steady diet of spectacular new images of nebulae and distant galaxies from the JWST, a calculated distraction campaign, the Pentagon's Space Force Division, acting on the direct, secret orders of the Aegis Council, was executing the most sensitive operation in its history. They hijacked the telescope. They fabricated a critical systems error in the telescope's public-facing schedule, a calibration anomaly that forced it to go dark and point at a blank patch of sky for 72 hours. This blank patch was a lie. This was the window. The full, awesome, and terrifying power of the God's K, the $10 billion God's Eye, was turned away from the edge of time and aimed, with pinpoint precision, at the gravitational center of the free I/Atlas debris cloud. This was not a scientific observation. This was a military operation. The order was simple: pierce the veil. Find the core. The scientists and generals in the secret control room at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore were not expecting to find a comet. They were looking for the engine. They were looking for the weapon. They were looking for the heat signature of the entity that had attacked our planet. And in the first few hours of data, they found something that was not just terrifying, but physically impossible. The first data from the JWST's infrared eye began to stream into the secure server. The scientists were not looking for an image yet, they were looking for a temperature reading. They were performing a thermal analysis of the cloud center. Their models predicted one of two scenarios. Scenario A, they would find nothing but the cold, ambient temperature of deep space, approximately 3 Kelvin. This would prove that the comet had truly shattered, that it was all just cold, dead debris. Scenario B, they would find a hot spot. This was the one they feared. A heat signature would be the undeniable proof of an engine, a power source, or a weapon system, a machine that was on and generating heat. What they found, however, was Scenario C. An option so impossible, so contrary to the known laws of physics, that the lead scientist on the project reportedly had to rerun the calibration sequence 3 times, believing the $10 billion telescope was fundamentally broken. The data showed a cold spot. But it was not cold in the way space is cold. The gravitational center of the free I/Atlas cloud was not 3 Kelvin. It was 0.1 Kelvin. It was a region of impossible cold, a place colder than the cosmic microwave background, colder than the empty void itself. This is a direct, screaming violation of the second law of thermodynamics. An object cannot be colder than cold. It is a physical impossibility. Unless the object is not radiating energy, but absorbing it. The data showed that the core was a perfect heat sink, a quantum-level energy converter. It was actively, and with 100% efficiency, sucking all ambient energy from its surroundings, sunlight, cosmic rays, background radiation, and consuming it. This was the signature of a power system so advanced it was like magic. It was a void predator, feeding on the universe itself. The object was not on. It was hungry. This terrifying discovery was the smoking gun before the photographs. It was the absolute, undeniable proof that this was a machine. And now, they had to see what it looked like. With the thermal signature of the impossible cold spot pinpointed, the JWST team knew exactly where to aim. The mission now shifted from thermal analysis to direct imaging. They initiated a long-duration spectral filtering protocol, a technique the telescope was designed to use to find tiny planets next to bright stars. But here, it was being used to filter out the noise of the debris cloud from the signal of the core. For 48 agonizing hours, the telescope stared, its sensitive instruments stacking thousands of individual frames, building an image, one photon at a time. The algorithm, straining at the limits of its design, began to subtract the dust, to erase the ice crystals, to peel back the layers of the smokescreen. In the secure control room, the Aegis Council watched on a live feed as the final image slowly, terribly, resolved on the main screen. The silence in the room was not one of awe. It was a silence of pure, primal, existential terror. The image was not of rock. It was not a cluster of rocks. It was a structure. A perfect, colossal, and undeniably manufactured object. The photograph, now classified at a level higher than any nuclear secret, showed a machine approximately 15 miles wide. It was a perfect, six-sided, crystalline snowflake of impossible geometric complexity, a framework of perfect, 90-degree angles and repeating, fractal patterns, like a von Neumann probe had merged with a cathedral. Its hull was a material that was perfectly, absolutely black, absorbing 100% of all light, a material that made Vantablack look like a spotlight. And across this impossible black framework, there were lights. Not hot, bright lights, but cold, impossible, blue-violet lights, arranged in perfect, non-random sequences that moved and pulsed with a slow, cold, intelligent rhythm. It was the single, undeniable, and catastrophic smoking gun. The debate was over. The broken comet was a lie. The solar flare was a lie. Humanity was, and had been for months, being orbited by a colossal, ancient, and active alien machine that had, until this moment, been hiding in plain sight. This was the photograph, the single most terrifying, secret, and world-ending image ever taken. The photograph was not just a picture, it was a cryptographic key, a data set of such profound importance that the Aegis Council knew it could not be analyzed in a vacuum. A clean team was needed, red cell of brilliant minds, firewalled from the panic and the political fallout, who could analyze the data with cold, brutal objectivity. The raw JWST spectral and imaging data, stripped of all context of where it came from, was securely routed to a joint, sequestered team from Harvard and MIT's materials science and astrophysics departments. They were told they were analyzing a novel deep space object of unusual crystalline structure. They were not told it was in our solar system. They were not told it had attacked our satellites. They were simply told, "Tell us what this is." Their report, delivered 72 hours later, was the scientific document that ended the world. The first part of the analysis focused on geometry. The object, the report stated, exhibited long-range, repeating, geometric order on a macro scale, specifically, perfect 90-degree and 60-degree angles in its primary framework, sustained over a 15-mile structure. The conclusion was blunt: natural crystalline growth, even in zero gravity, is governed by fractal, chaotic, and environmental factors. It does not produce sustained, perfect, Euclidean geometry on a macro scale. The probability of this object's geometric structure being at the natural formation is statistically indistinguishable from zero. The second part analyzed material. The impossible black hole, which absorbed all light, was identified not as a rock, but as a single-layer, atomic monolayer lattice, a form of 2D material, like graphene, but built from forbidden, super-heavy elements. It was, they concluded, a perfectly efficient, manufactured solar sail and stealth shield in one. The third part analyzed the lights. The cold, blue lights were not lights at all. The JWST spectral data showed they were coherent, quantum dot-based emissions, not a hot thermal source, but a cold informational one. The pulses were not random. They were, the report concluded, a non-trivial, high-bandwidth data processing network operating on the object's surface. The final summary of the joint Harvard/MIT team, a team that had no idea of the true context, was a single, devastating paragraph. The object designated JWST prime 001 is, with a 99.999% degree of certainty, a manufactured, technological construct of non-human origin, exhibiting properties of active energy conversion, data processing, and a structural integrity that implies a purpose of interstellar travel. The machine was real. The science was absolute. The Harvard/MIT report was the what. The Aegis Council now needed the why. The full, unredacted report, along with the impossible cold spot data, was presented to Michio Kaku and a small team of the world's top theoretical physicists. This was the moment the true, existential horror of the situation was given a name. Kaku's diagnosis, according to leaks, was immediate and left no room for hope. This is not a first contact scenario, he explained. This is not a visitor. This is not a ship with pilots. What you are staring at is infinitely more terrifying. This is a von Neumann probe. He had to explain the concept to the shell-shocked generals and politicians. A von Neumann probe is an autonomous, self-replicating, interstellar machine. It is a virus for the galaxy. It is designed to travel from one star system to the next, and upon arrival, its prime directive is to use the raw materials of that system, the asteroids, the comets, the planets themselves, to build copies of itself. It is an automated, exponential, and unstoppable form of colonization. Kaku then connected all the dots, one by one. The cold spot engine. That was the probe's refueling system, absorbing the solar wind and background energy of our system to power its replication cycle. The broken comet smokescreen. That was its resource collection phase. It had not broken. It had deliberately harvested the ice and minerals from its own comet shell to use as raw materials. The artificial structure itself. That, Kaku explained, was the replicator, the mother probe, the factory. Kaku then presented the three, horrifying flavors a von Neumann probe could take. Was it a survey probe, designed to simply explore and send data home? Unlikely, given its aggressive stealth and attack on our satellites. Was it a construction probe, designed to terraform a world or build a megastructure? Possible. Or was it the one they all feared, a berserker probe? A von Neumann probe designed with one sole, paranoid purpose, to seek out any star system that shows the biosignature of emerging, intelligent life, and to sterilize it before it can become a competitor. You have not, Kaku concluded, found it a ship. You have found that the virus that is about to replicate. And the first, logical step of any berserker is to eliminate the local biological infection. That is us. The Aegis Council was now faced with an impossible crisis. They were in possession of a smoking gun photograph that proved, beyond all doubt, that an alien machine, a potential berserker, was in our system, refueling. The Atlas panic that had followed the satellite blackout was nothing compared to the global, existential hysteria that would erupt if this photograph was released. The broken comet lie was dead. A new lie was needed, one that was more sophisticated, a lie that could incorporate the new data and neutralize it. The decision was made, they would release the JWST photo. But they would release a corrupted version. The world's intelligence agencies, in a joint, secret operation, went to work. They took the pristine, high-resolution, terrifyingly geometric image, and they degraded it. They fuzzed the perfect 90-degree angles. They added sensor noise and cosmic ray artifacts to blur the perfect, metallic hull. They overexposed the cold, blue, informational lights until they bloomed into a chaotic, natural-looking flare of ice crystals. The result was a masterpiece of deception. NASA, as the public face of the operation, released the official JWST image. The press release was a scientific marvel of half-truths. JWST pierces 3I/Atlas's veil, the headline read, revealing a stunning, crystalline core. The official explanation was that the core had not fully broken, but was a single, massive, snowflake-like ice crystal, rare, natural phenomenon that was dazzling scientists. But the Aegis Council, in their arrogance, had underestimated the human element. A single, low-level analyst on the real JWST team, a Promethean hawk who believed humanity had the right to know the truth of its own extinction, committed the greatest act of treason in history. He copied the original, pristine, high-resolution, 40-gigabyte master file, the one showing the perfect, black, 15-mile-wide machine, and he leaked it. He uploaded it to a decentralized, untraceable data haven. Within an hour, the Atlas panic exploded into a global infowar. The public now had two photos. The official photo, which was blurry, beautiful, and natural. And the leaked photo, which was crystal clear, geometric, and artificial. The world was split in two, between those who believed the comforting government lie, and those who saw the terrifying, high-resolution truths. While the world was tearing itself apart in a digital civil war over which photo to believe, the Aegis Council and the JWST team were facing a new, far more immediate, and far more terrifying reality. The leaked photo was already out of date. The machine was no longer hiding. The machine was no longer refueling. The machine was active. The leaked photo had shown a static, snowflake-like object. But the JWST, in its hot mic state, was still staring at it. And the real-time thermal and visual data was now showing something new. The impossible cold spot flashed. For a period of 48 hours, the heat sink engine at the core reversed. The thermal sensors on the JWST were overwhelmed as the entity, for the first time, vented a colossal plume of heat and exotic particles into the void. It was the exhaust of a forge, the waste heat of a massive, internal process that had just been completed. The refueling cycle was over. The construction cycle had begun. The JWST's high-resolution imagers, which were still locked onto the object, confirmed this. The snowflake, which had been static for months, was moving. Its 6 long, geometric arms were seen, in a slow, terrible, and majestic motion, reconfiguring. They were folding, shifting, and redeploying, moving from a passive travel and refuel state into a new, active configuration. The cold, blue, informational lights on its hull, which had been pulsing in a steady, rhythmic, standby mode, were now flashing with frantic, chaotic, high-speed intensity. The entire 15-mile structure was alive with a new, urgent purpose. The Harvard/MIT team, watching this new data in their secure bunker, could only come to one conclusion. This was the von Neumann hypothesis made manifest. The probe was awake. It had finished absorbing energy and matter. It was now using that energy and matter to build. It was reconfiguring itself from a probe into a factory. The only question was, what was it building? Was it building a copy of itself? Or was it building a weapon? The reconfiguration of the 15-mile-wide machine was the single most terrifying event in human history, but it was still an indifferent act. The machine was waking up, but it still seemed, for all its power, to be completely unaware, or at least unconcerned, with the tiny, primitive species that was watching it from 93 million miles away. All of that changed at 7:52 Universal Time Coordinated. The JWST was in the middle of a long exposure sequence, capturing the intricate refolding of one of the machine's primary arms. And then, it stopped. All of it. The flashing data lights on the hull went dark. The reconfiguring arms froze in mid-motion. A new, slow, and impossibly precise mechanical movement began. A structure at the very center of the snowflake hub, a part of the machine that had previously been closed and unremarkable, began to iris open, like the aperture of a camera or the pupil of an eye. This new, circular eye was miles wide, and it was made of the same, perfect, impossible black material. And then, with a speed that defied all known engineering, this eye swiveled. It was no longer pointing in its direction of travel. It was no longer pointing at our sun. In a single, silent, and deliberate motion, it turned and pointed directly at the L2 Lagrange point, the precise, mathematical, empty spot in space where, it knew, the James Webb Space Telescope was hiding. It had sensed us. It had felt the focused, persistent gaze of our telescope's infrared sensors staring at it for weeks. It knew it was being watched. And it did not approve. A single, thin, and impossibly bright beam of coherent, ultraviolet light, a laser of unimaginable power, flashed from the center of the eye. It was not a blast or an explosion. It was a scalpel. It was a blinding shot. In the secure control room in Baltimore, every screen connected to the JWST's primary imager and sensors went, in a single, catastrophic instant, to a black screen of static. The last, $10 billion, God's eye, that humanity possessed was now dead. The feed was gone. The machine had just, with contemptuous ease, poked out the eye that was watching it. The entity was now fully awake. It was active. It was hostile. And we were, once again, completely and totally blind.